Hello Simmers and welcome to Grand Canyon National Airport, the default scenery in X-Plane 11, where we are with the Piper by Just Flight, and we are on our way for a VFR flight over the Grand Canyon, which is made up of Ortho 4XP photo scenery tiles. And while we're at it, I will share my thoughts on the new upcoming Flight Simulator 2020, because I think there's just some thoughts that I want to share and that I really would like to hear your opinion on, because I'm a little bit in doubt whether I shall buy it or not. But let's just take off first and get back to Flight Sim 2020 in a minute. Ooh. So on the horizon, on the other side of the tree line, there's the Grand Canyon. So we're just heading down there. So any of you YouTubers who haven't been asleep or under a rock the past couple of months have noticed that there is a new sim on the horizon, namely Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And as soon as the first trailers appeared, basically I was hooked. I thought it looked smashing. There's the cinematic trailers that Microsoft released, they looked amazing, truly amazing. But over time I started to generate more doubts on whether Flight Simulator 2020 will be the platform for me and whether I should buy it or not. Just a little track record on my flight sim history. When I was just a kid, like 11 or 12 years old, my dad brought home an IBM 486 computer, and that had one of the earlier versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator on it. I started using it then in like a very unprofessional, childish way, just as a game, flying circuits at Mike's Field, but always kept in touch with Flight Simulator. I bought a friend of mine had, I think it was Flight Sim 98, or I don't know what it was called, but anyway, he had one of the newer flight sims. Then I bought Flight Simulator 2000, got 2004, got Flight Simulator X, and in 2014 I switched to X-Plane, a move that I have never regretted, by the way. And basically since 2014 it was first X-Plane 10, and then of course came X-Plane 11. Bought a new computer with better hardware specs, so it could basically use those platforms as they... Just have to trim the airplane just a second. With a very decent performance at good visual settings. So I really composed my PC to be top of the notch. I think it was in 2016 that I bought it. So flight simulation as a hobby, if I only look back for the past like 6 years that I've been using X-Plane, I've invested like, I think $3,000, probably a little bit more, on add-ons. and well over $2,000 in hardware. Now the hardware I don't find that much of a problem because I can use all that hardware in Flight Simulator 2020 as well. I just think it is such a waste, and I'm not willing to throw outside the window all the add-ons that I bought for X-Plane. And I'm really happy about X-Plane. There's just one major thing missing in X-Plane that is very well done in Flight Simulator 2020, judging by the trailers. I'm not an alpha or a beta tester. I haven't had my hands on Flight Simulator 2020, so all that I'm saying is based on basically the trailers and since the last couple of days the user footage that's been appearing on YouTube. Now over the past couple of days it seems that the non-disclosure agreement was lifted, so the alpha and beta testers and the major major YouTubers were allowed to create their own content and share that, which was a pretty good thing and also quite an eye-opener. But what I derived from the trailers and what Microsoft has done excellent is the introduction of seasons. Just seasons: summer, winter, autumn, spring. And that's something that is lacking in X-Plane 11 and that I actually miss in X-Plane 11. I know that on one occasion someone asked the X-Plane developers like, will you implement seasons in X-Plane? And basically that question was laughed away a little bit with a remark something like, well, most folks like to fly in summer, so why bother? I don't know, that it weren't the exact words, but that was what it came down to. And I think highly. I have a lot of respect for the developers of X-Plane. They are experts in their fields. They really know what they're doing, and they do an amazing job with the flight dynamics, etc. But I think that comment, that remark, that was a grave error in judgment from the part of Laminar, because I think seasons are what makes flying interesting. And I'm not the type of guy who only wants to fly in summer. Maybe it's nice if you want a quiet flight, but what I really would like to do is take like a Piper Cub somewhere in Alaska and fly in Arctic conditions, because that can be a huge challenge. And right now in X-Plane I am not able to do that, and that would be my main reason to try Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, because the seasons, the icing model, the way icing is displayed on the airplanes, what I saw in the trailers, that just looked stunning. It was really, really amazing what the development team for Flight Sim 2020 has achieved in that respect. Another thing that is also appearing to be very nice is the weather engine. By that I mean the way that air is simulated in the sim, the way that air flows over terrain, how it impacts you. I have very high hopes for the flight dynamics, but like I said, I'm not an alpha or beta tester. I haven't tried the sim, so there's nothing I can say about that. You cannot derive that from the videos. But the fact that there are a lot of moving parts that can be affected by the wind on every airplane gives me high hopes that you will feel some sort of realism when you are flying that, as far as that is possible in a desktop simulator. I mean, flying, I used to fly gliders when I was younger, and my instructor always said flying is feeling, and I really agree with that statement. You have to feel the airplane, you have to feel, and that's very hard, if not impossible, to achieve in a desktop situation where you are just basically sitting in your chair behind a computer. But I have very high hopes. It's a big question mark for me. What will the flight dynamics feel like? What will be the immersion of that? I am hopeful, because from what I read and what I saw, I don't think it will be too bad. But will it be able to compete to X-Plane? Because when I made the move from Flight Simulator to X-Plane, it was the flight dynamics in X-Plane that really really draw me into it. I cannot explain it, but just the flight dynamics in X-Plane, especially with the smaller GA aircraft, it's just so incredibly good. It's such a good simulation of how an airplane reacts, but still not perfect, because I don't think that the behavior in like a spin or something, that's still very hard to do, even in X-Plane 11. But in general, it was much better than what we had in Flight Simulator X. On the contrary, what was better in Flight Simulator X and what I'm missing in X-Plane was the out-of-the-box ATC. I think the air traffic control model in Flight Sim 2004 Flight Simulator X was much better than the one in X-Plane. Much user-friendly in any way. Well, but that's not the most important thing for me. I mean, I haven't really missed it over the couple of years. I most do my flying offline on my own, and well, if you want a true ATC experience, go fly on FatSim online to some airport that is manned by a FatSim controller, and you won't get that kind of. I think that makes it ATC as real as it can get in a sim environment. There's that other platform which mainly does the US airspace. Can't remember the name right now, but well, the ATC feature in FSX, that was much better than X-Plane. I'm really anxious to see what it will be like in Flight Simulator 2020, because in one of the videos from a user that I saw, he took off with a 747 from Edwards into a thunderstorm. And then he had to call ground control that he wanted to push back, and it was, yeah, received, we'll pass it on to the ground handler. And I was like, what kind of nonsense is that? I mean, you talk to the truck driver from the flight deck directly. You ask ATC for permission, and they give you the permission, and then you arrange the rest with the truck driver directly. There's no ATC between that. So that was a bit awkward, so to say. That is, in a sim where they have so much realism, that something small like that wasn't done correctly. But back to where I was, the weather engine, the way that air was is moving over terrain alongside buildings, how that affects everything, that looks very, very promising. I was less impressed, I think, than most people, judging by the comments that I'm reading on YouTube and on other platforms or forums or whatever, by the cloud textures that are out of the box. They look nice, and they look much better than what it was in Flight Simulator X, and I think they are probably better than what you get out of the box in X-Plane 11, but I still believe that there is much room for improvement. I think that Rex will come along with a product making even better clouds. And to illustrate what I'm trying to say, this is a screenshot from Flight Simulator 2020. And don't get distracted by the PBRs on the airframe. Look closely at the clouds. They look very low res, unsharp, shallow to me. And if you compare that to the Rex clouds, well, I think they're not actually that good as anyone is saying. What is very nice is what I meant with the weather engine. That's the way how clouds build up in Flight Simulator 2020. Of course, in some of the earliest footage that was released by Microsoft themselves, you had these like time warps on how a thunderstorm developed, and that was amazing to see. But a side note to that footage is, when you are using the sim yourself and you are flying, you won't be using that time warp, so you don't get to see that developing at that speed. It will be a very slow and gradual process, depending on the conditions, of course. But I think the expectations that particular trailer raised might be a little bit too high. That's my concern. I mean, like I said, I I'm not an alpha or a beta tester. I haven't used the product. It's just purely based on what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking by what I'm seeing. So cloud textures, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I guess that Rex will come aboard, or hi-fi simulations, or whoever with a Rex or an Active Sky product to enhance the cloud textures, to make it look even more stunning. Because like I said, it definitely wasn't bad, but I'm reading comments like, well, I buy FS2020 and I don't need any add-ons anymore because everything is so cool, and I don't think that's the case at all. If you're a die-hard simmer, you really want to get improvements over a lot of fields in the sim. Right now, my summarization of Flight Sim 2020, based on what I've seen, is that it's mainly it's a good weather engine with nice seasons, and especially a lot of eye candy. And by eye candy, I mean everything looks really nice, including the airplanes, especially from the outside. But I really have my doubts about whether it will satisfy me as a simmer, because I think it's much more game-like right now, and that's perfectly understandable. I mean, Microsoft will launch it also on the Xbox Game Pass. Now, I think worldwide there will be millions of people with an Xbox Game Pass, and those people are not the kind of people that are waiting for add-ons that take like half an hour to start up from cold and dark before they are finally at a runway to start the actual flying. I mean, to be honest, and with all respect, most flight simmers in that respect are like a bit of geeks. We love the attention to all sort of small details that most people couldn't care less about. So Microsoft is making a platform aimed for the big masses because, of course, they want to make it a success. And the positive side is that they have stated the intention to at least support the platform for a decade, which took away one of my other concerns, which was, well, with all that global scenery being on their servers, what if the platform is not the commercial success that they hoped for? Will they just pull the plug, and then I have paid a lot of money and I'm left behind empty-handed? And that was a big concern to me. But the statement that they are having at least the intention to support the platform and improve the platform for the next decade, that gives some more hopes. But like I said, one of my concerns is the fact that when you buy the sim, you don't have all the files on your own system, and that's not possible because the global scenery, to which I'll come back in a minute, looks stunning, but it will take lots of terabytes of data, and you just cannot sell that. No one has a computer that has enough disk space to store all that data on their own. It's just not realistic. But buying something, spending between $60 and $120 on a platform that you can use, but you do not own all the files, that's something that, well, I don't feel comfortable with. Let's put it that way. Let's turn a little bit further to the left here, by the way. So that's to me, that's a big plus of X-Plane. I bought the program, I've got all the files on my PC, I can do with them what I like, when I like it. Even if Laminar was stopping the development of X-Plane 11, I could just leave the system here, I could use it for the next 30 years if that was my intention. And that will not be possible with Flight Simulator 2020, because there will be a moment in time, and hopefully that will be a long time ahead of us, where they will say, well, let's stop the development, let's pull the plug, and then you cannot use the program anymore. And especially if you start to spend money on extra add-ons that will definitely be available. I mean, PMDG has already announced they will transfer their entire fleet, I think with the exception of the MD-11, to Flight Simulator 2020. So if you start to buy Rex, which will probably be, when it releases, between $30 and $50, then there will be the PMDG planes, and if they arrive, I'm very anxious what their pricing will be, because in prepared, PMDG raised their prices a lot. I thought they were ridiculously expensive, but they said that the high prices had something to do with the licensing in prepared, that it wasn't a game but a professional platform and blah blah blah. And anyway, they thought it was justified to really increase the prices a lot. But Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is a game, and I'm really anxious to see whether they will go back to the lower prices we had before, or whether they will stick to the prepared prices in Flight Simulator 2020. So that's an interesting one to watch, because I don't think it will be justified to stick to the high prices in Flight Sim 2020 if your argument for raising the prices was the licensing in prepared, which will be different in Flight Sim 2020. But anyway, so not all the files are on your own system, and well, there's still a lot of need for add-ons. And when it comes down to add-ons, well, like I said, I already spent, well, something like between $2,500, $3,000, maybe more than $3,000 on add-ons in X-Plane. And there's still some exciting add-ons on approach to be released in X-Plane. I mean, last week I saw a trailer of an Airbus A300 cargo or freighter with excellent both exterior, interior shots and system depth, and I'm really anxious to get my hands on that one. Rotate Sim has been developing their MD-11 for quite a while, and that's in quite an advanced stage right now, and I'm really anxious to get my hands on that one. I'm a sucker for trijets. I love them, and the MD-11 is one of my all-time favorite commercial airplanes. With PMDG having dropped their MD-11, if I want to fly the MD-11, I will have to stick to X-Plane, because if that Rotate Sim MD-11 will have the same quality as their MD-80, I'm hooked. And I won't switch to Flight Sim 2020. I will just buy that one and start doing long-haul flights with some, I think mainly the freighter versions. But anyway, another add-on that's on my wish list and that's been in development for quite some time now is the FlyJ Sim Dash-8 Q400. That also looks stunning. So there's still a lot of exciting stuff in the works for X-Plane 11, combined with the investment that I've already made. Is basically I don't want to switch to FS 2020. And like I said in the beginning of the video, the main reason why I want to try it is, well, the seasons and the weather engine. And I think that now let me just discuss one other topic first before I move over to the next part. The other thing that I'm a little bit concerned about with FS 2020 is that the airplanes, especially the Airbus and the Boeing planes that I saw, I think they have a high, I don't know how to put it in English, but like a high level of Coronado style planes, meaning they look excellent on the outside. They look excellent on the inside, but in terms of system depth, they are quite shallow. And you cannot expect anything else from default airplanes out of the box. I mean, if you take Flight Vector or PMDG or whoever, they spend a lot of time and resources on getting their products as accurately as they can, and you cannot expect developers from a new sim to create both the world, everything else, and also make study level add-ons. It's just not possible. It's an unrealistic expectation. But still, I'm reading in a lot of comments people saying, well, I just buy FS 2020 and I'm done. I don't need any other add-ons. Well, I think those people will be very, very disappointed in the product, because they are going in with the wrong expectations. But that's just my impression. I say it once again, I haven't tried the sim. I'm not an alpha or a beta tester for Flight Sim 2020. I'm just an X-Plane guy who is now loving the Ortho 4XP imagery of the Grand Canyon in X-Plane 11. this is not Flight Simulator 2020. This is X-Plane 11 with Ortho 4XP photo scenery tiles, which I think still make for a pretty picture. And that brings me to the scenery in Flight Simulator 2020. Of course, the scenery that's been really hyped with all the stunning sights and airports and cities. But I'm afraid that what Microsoft showed in their trailers are, of course, the best bits of that global scenery, and they have every right to do that. They're a commercial company, they have developed something, they want to sell it. Of course you're gonna show off the best bits. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, that's just the way the world works. But they're using Bing as their primary source, and especially the major cities, the capital cities, well, they look stunning in 3D. I saw footage from Berlin, London, I saw, well, it's not a capital, but San Francisco, Los Angeles, they all looked really, really impressive. But my concern with that is that not the entire globe will have that much realism in the 3D scenery. It's only like the well-known places, the big cities, some sites, I guess. But and the reason why I think that is, well, I'm Dutch, and if I go to Google Earth also gives me the ability to look at some cities in 3D. For example, if I go to Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, and I zoom in, here we go, nice 3D rendition of the city. And this is basically the same stuff that you will see in Flight Sim 2020, as far as I have understood it. And that's nice, and it looks excellent, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they give the impression that all the global scenery will have that level of detail, and I just don't buy it. Because, for instance, if I move over to some random small village and I zoom in, I don't get 3D imagery. And Flight Simulator 2020, it's not a secret, you won't have it in small rural towns. They will use satellite imagery, but combined with autogen, which is basically the same what we have in X-Plane 11 already. There's autogen, and that autogen is derived from Openstreetmap's data. And I'm not really sure whether Flight Sim 2020 will use Openstreetmap or OSM data for their autogen. In X-Plane, I am using, well, the sim uses OSM data, and for the regions that I fly regularly, I have created my own Ortho 4XP photo scenery tiles. And if you combine those photo scenery tiles with OpenStreetMap data autogen, you get a very nice approximation of the reality. It's not perfect, it cannot be perfect, but still it is very, very good in as far as autogen can be good, at least. And the benefit of using OpenStreetMap data is that you can actually sign up to OpenStreetMap, and you can input data on the OpenStreetMap platform. And if you use a freeware add-on like X-Europe in X-Plane, you get updates every couple of months, and if you have updated the OSM data, then that will be translated into your sim. And a good example of that is when you're flying in the Netherlands. There's this region between The Hague and Rotterdam, which is here. And if you look here on top, most of these are glass houses where they grow the vegetables. In the first version of X-Europe and X-Plane, this was in OSM pointed out as an industrial area, so you get like office buildings, etc. Someone took the effort to point out which were greenhouses, and now when I'm in X-Europe and I fly over this area, I will actually see glass houses or greenhouses, I don't know the correct term. So it's not bad, especially if you're using Ortho 4XP imagery as the base for the autogen. you get quite a good picture. And of course, it cannot compete with Flight Sim 2020, which has the entire globe in photo scenery tiles, and it will take you far less disk space because it's only 150 gigabyte install. But you have to download all the scenery from servers from Microsoft. You don't have that data on your own PC. If the servers are down for whatever reason, you will not be able to use your sim. It's that easy. And it can be because somewhere in the future Microsoft will stop the development and maybe the support for Flight Sim 2020. But it can also be like some sort of hacker or cyber criminal thinks, hey, that's funny, I'm just gonna hack the servers, put them down until Microsoft pays me like $1 million to open the servers again. I mean, we live in a strange world, and a lot of that stuff is actually possible, and I'm not really sure whether I like that, but or at least like I don't like that, but I don't like the fact that some of the core files for using a program that I bought are on someone else's server, and I'm completely dependent on a third party to have access to my own product. I don't like that. I really don't. But I'm a suspicious person, so that might just be me. And I'm really curious how you guys think of that. But anyway, to summarize, I think Flight Sim 2020 is a lot of eye candy. It has, by the looks of it, an excellent weather engine. It has seasons. The global scenery, well, another thought of mine with all that global scenery stuff is some regions look excellent, but if I take a look at my own use of sims, and in my case that will be X-Plane, I don't fly across the entire globe. I just fly in a few regions, and most of my flying in a sim is not even VFR, it's IFR. It's flying an Airbus or a Boeing or some other passenger airplane between two cities. And most of those cities are in Western Europe, or California, or the southern parts of the US. And for the regions that I fly most regularly, I can make freeware Ortho 4XP tiles combined with freeware mesh files. That gives quite an impressive landscape. And the other regions, I think since 2014 when I started using X-Plane, I haven't done a single flight in Africa. I think if I've flown in South America twice, it's a lot. I do the occasional trip to Eastern Europe, but that's still the European side. Not, I haven't flown to Russia, for instance. So that raises the question to me, for my type of simming, do I need all that global scenery? Because basically if I want to look at London in 3D, I can just download Google Earth. I'll go to London, I'll zoom in. I get basically the same 3D models of very famous buildings, and I can pan around them just like I would in the sim. So I think, because this comes down to the big question, to buy or not to buy, I think the first thing you really have to ask yourself is, what type of a simmer am I? Does it pay off to start buying all the add-ons that I already bought for another platform again for a new platform, basically just because of some eye candy? Because that's the biggest part of it. I think Flight Sim 2020 just looks stunning. It's an amazing platform. I think if X-Plane users would unite and ask Laminar to really start applying seasons, then there will be no need for me to switch to Flight Sim 2020. I'm perfectly happy with X-Plane 11, and the only thing that I really want to see added is the seasons. I mean, with Active Sky XP, I'm quite happy with the weather. I'm happy with the flight dynamics. The regions that I fly in that I usually fly in, I have covered in very nice scenery, either Ortho 4XP or OrbX regional products. There's no trigger for me to go to X-Plane 11, and especially if you're the type of simmer who really loves hardcore, in-depth system simulations, as real as it gets, like a Flight Factor, A320 or PMDG type of aircraft. I think for the first, well, at least a couple of weeks, I'm not sure how long it will take PMDG to release their first airplanes for Flight Sim 2020. I don't know how long they've been developing, but I think with just the out-of-the-box airplanes of Flight Simulator 2020, they're not gonna satisfy me as a simmer, because what I really like is the system depth. I like to take the Zibo mod, the 737-800, the IXEG 737-400, Flight Factor A320, Flight Factor 757. Those type of add-ons from one city to another, that's the type of simming that I like, and I like to do that in as much detail as I possibly can, as much realism as I possibly can. And at least initially that won't be possible in Flight Sim 2020. I'm convinced that the Airbus and the 7478 out of the box will have limited system depth, because it's just not possible to make a PMDG style airplane, develop that alongside the rest of the sim. And no, if you look at the resources and the time it takes companies like PMDG to make their add-ons, it's just not possible. So I think anyone who has that expectation will be disappointed. But if you are a VFR pilot, if you're saying like, well, I like simming because I like to jump into a small GA airplane and visit interesting places that I would never visit in real life, and I don't really care about system depth as long as the plane looks nice and the world looks nice, yeah, I think you have to switch to Flight Sim 2020 immediately, because the global coverage of the scenery is completely new. I mean, there's no other sim on the market today that will be able to compete with that. So if that is your biggest concern, global scenery and a lot of eye candy, I think you should switch. But again, with the side note that you won't have the entire globe in the same level of detail as you would have, like for instance London or San Francisco or Berlin in Flight Sim 2020. So first question anyone should ask is, what is your type of simming? And if I look at the type of simming that I usually do, I don't think that I will buy Flight Sim 2020 directly. However, what I might do, because I already mentioned the pricing very briefly, they have like 3 product variants: the standard edition, which is like $60, the deluxe edition, which will be something like $90, and the premium deluxe being $120. And the difference is that in the deluxe and the premium deluxe you get some additional handcrafted airports and some extra airplanes. The standard version, however, will be available on the Xbox Game Pass, and the Xbox Game Pass right now is available from $1 a month onwards. So what I might do is buy an Xbox Game Pass for like $1 a month, and I can cancel that subscription anytime I like. Download the sim when it releases, just to see what the performance will be on my system, how the flight dynamics work out, and just to see if it's really as good as the trailers say. And so basically I can try the entire sim for $1 for a couple of days, and even if it will cost me like $7 or maybe $20, I'm still much cheaper than buying the product immediately. And I'll make up my mind then, because like I said, I'm not convinced, and I'm really curious what your thoughts are. What are your considerations, either to switch or not to switch, or to buy or not to buy? So please let me know in the comment section how you feel about that. Again, what you're looking at is the Grand Canyon in X-Plane 11 with freeware Ortho 4XP photo scenery tiles. And it can look even better because I created these tiles some time ago, and I didn't know back then how to use higher quality mesh as my base, and right now I do, so I might even rework those tiles to make it look even better, because, well, like in here, not everything is as good as it can be, but overall I think it's a very impressive image to look at the Grand Canyon in this quality. And this is X-Plane 11, this is not Flight Sim 2020. You just have to combine it with Ortho 4XP tiles, which take a lot of hard disk space. If you don't have that and you still want this, then I think Flight Sim 2020 is probably going to be quite a good alternative. But if you have the hard disk space and you fly in only select regions like I do, then it's perfectly possible to buy or create scenery in X-Plane 11 to make those parts look excellent. So, to be short, my impression of Flight Sim 2020 based on the videos that I've seen is that it is a lot of eye candy. I still have some serious doubts whether everything that is included in that platform, which is called Revolutionary, are things that I really need. I think for now most of the planes will not have the system depth that I like, so it's probably wiser for me at least to wait for third-party developers to release study level add-ons. What I do like about Flight Sim 2020, at least from the videos, is the weather engine and the seasons. I have some questions about the flight dynamics. I really want to try and feel it. I mean, there's no point in telling me what it's like. You just have to experience it yourself and then judge whether it's good enough for you or not. So those are my thoughts, and I'm really curious about what your thoughts are. Please tell me in the comment section. Maybe you heard me say things that are completely not correct, or maybe over time, I mean, this video is shot on the 2nd of August, so maybe next week more data is, more information is released, and some of the questions that I have are answered, and well, that's just possible. Let's just, I think it's a good time to end this video here. So I hope you liked it. Like I said, share your thoughts, your opinions, your considerations in the comment section below. What will you do? Will you stick to X-Plane, stick to Prepared, or switch to Flight Sim 2020? I'm really anxious to hear it. Hope to see you guys again on another video. I'm not making these videos for money, so there's no need to like and subscribe if you don't want that. It's all perfectly fine by me. I just do this for my own fun. So hope to see you again in another video. Until then, please stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.